Greetings, viewers, all 15,000 of you now. Can you believe it? Amazing. But we're going to do a fairly rare non-engine performance related diagnosis today. We're going to do a driveline diagnosis on a 2002 Mercury Mountaineer that is due to be towed in here any second now, and it is all-wheel drive. The owner actually has had the vehicle sitting for much of the winter because of some financial limitations in even being able to get a diagnosis. But the symptoms are, the owner states she was driving the vehicle, making a turn, heard a horrible clunking type sound that was quite intimidating, to the point that she decided that she didn't feel comfortable driving the vehicle and possibly doing some severe damage to it if it wasn't already done, and had the vehicle towed to her house while she tries to get together some finances to get a diagnosis and repair on it. Months later, still not being successful with that, I come to find out about this. The person has become somewhat of a friend of mine, and I'm anxious to help out and get her out of this situation. I did take a look at the vehicle a few days ago. Unfortunately, it was during a massive 2-foot snowfall, and I couldn't safely lift the vehicle and get a look under it thoroughly. But obviously, with clicking or clunking during turning sounds, any Haynes manual jockey who's never turned a wrench is going to give the advice that this is a bad CV joint, and it might even be a good guess. But I can tell you, I did drive the vehicle forwards just a little bit and heard this clunking sound. I am pretty safely confident this is not going to be a bad CV joint. I think it's going to be much worse than that. So another example where you don't just jump to a diagnosis based on a description of symptoms. I think that would be a dire mistake here to get a CV joint installed in this vehicle based on that. We'll take a look and see what it is. As I said, this owner is kind of in a little situation that I'm going to try to help her out of, because she did the same for me once. I actually met Dory last October. Dory works at the grocery store up the street from me. And last October, I was giving a talk at a medical center up here to like 140 scientists about some protein identification thing or something. And I had wanted catering done for this. And Dory works in the bakery at this grocery store, and she was responsible for the food preparation and the catering. Dory had been working her ass off on this catering project, coming in early and staying late for a couple of days. And then on top of that, I come to find out that the delivery that I had arranged for this event that I'm doing totally fell through at the last minute. And Dory, actually using the Mountaineer, personally delivered the food on time, having to wake up extra early because she had to drive extra slow to make sure nothing spilled over and everything. And the truth is, this woman came through for me big time at a clutch time when I really needed to count on somebody. That does not go unforgotten. So when I come to find out that Dory is in this situation, I wish I had heard about it sooner, because I would have immediately done what I'm doing now, and that is rush to the chance to see if we can get her out of this situation with as minimal expense as possible. Dory has been taking the bus to work for quite some time now, and I will tell you, anybody that has come through for me when I really needed to count on somebody, they are not going to be taking the bus to work if I can have anything to do with it. So that's kind of the background and story here. So anyway, I think I hear the tow truck pulling up right about now, so let me go ahead and get changed here, and let's go ahead and see what we got. So as one of my neighbors has pointed out, this scene here starts the official launch of the weekend for him. But the trick to making sure your neighbors aren't mad at you about this stuff is to fix their cars too. Well, we had a little struggle with getting the car in here because of dead battery, which is totally expected after sitting, especially in a cold Denver winter. Before trying to start the car, when I can see the battery was dead, I did try to pull codes, see if I could get a transmission code. There was a check engine light on the vehicle, but the codes were just an 0171 and 74 for lean condition, which of course most of you guys are thinking, hey, probably more interested in that than with this driveline, and you would be right, I am. But I have to fix the driveline first, and then maybe we'll take a look at that in another video. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this microphone on the floorboard and drive this vehicle forward a little bit. Let you take a listen if we can catch that clunking sound. Oh, there. Okay, I think you can hear that. All right, so let's take a look at this CV joint here, and that looks good. I can actually see the other side looks good too. Just a bunch of obvious crud that you would expect on a 13-year-old car, but let's go ahead and turn this. And yeah, I can definitely see where we're going to have an issue right here. Let me go ahead and give you a look at this. So what we're looking at here is this differential here, and when I turn the wheel, you can see there is a very considerable amount of play there. So I don't know if we've got a bad mount. My suspicion is we're not going to be that lucky. My bet is something is broken and binding in there that has caused it to either crack the case. But let's go ahead and take a closer look here. Okay, so we can see that thing's bouncing all over the place now, and my guess is something's going to be broken in there because there's fluid all over the bottom of it. And let's see. Again, sorry for the camera work. These under-car shots are really hard, but yeah, that's just really loose in there. Let's see if we can find out where the mount is broken at. All right, I don't think I can get a good shot of this, but you can see hopefully the mount there between the tie rod and the axle shaft there. And if I rock this, well, I can see it for sure, but it's just bouncing around in that bushing there as if there's no bushing. But again, I don't think that that's the cause of this problem. I think that's the result of the problem because check out what I found. So if we look at the housing on this differential right here on the back of the differential, we've got a big gaping hole. And no, that is not for a drain plug or anything. Something punched right through this differential. So clearly we are going to need to replace the differential on this thing. But before just jumping to that as the thing, is it possible that this also could be the result of something else? So what I'm going to do is obviously we can follow our drive shaft to the transfer case here, and we can maybe see the other axle there where it comes out from the rear of that transfer case. Is it possible that that transfer case is damaged or binding or something, which caused the failure up here at this differential? So we need to inspect that to be sure that we don't put a differential in this thing only to have it blow up on us again. So what my idea is to make sure that we also don't have a broken transfer case, which could of course cause that problem up front. I'm going to go ahead and turn this drive shaft by hand. I have the car in drive right now. And you can see maybe you can see right here the front drive shaft turning, which is kind of a good sign, I guess. But let's go ahead and turn this, and it's getting a little rough. Oh, and right there it catches. Right there. It catches, and you know what? Gosh, it kind of feels like it's catching in the transfer case. Boy, I hope not. I hope I am wrong about that. But the thing is, we can't know for sure, because if we're catching in the front differential, then of course the axle is going to be jammed, and that may make it feel like it's catching in the transfer case. So I hope I'm right about that. So how am I going to determine that we are not catching in the transfer case? And the way I think I'm going to do that, if I remove the front drive and this freely spins, that's going to be really good evidence that we've got a good transfer case, and that would be great news for Dory. So I really hope that's the case. So let's go ahead and get this front drive out, and then we'll see what happens here. All right, I've got the front drive shaft disconnected from the front differential now. So if the front differential was binding up, I should be able to spin my transfer case free now. You might be able to see here where my finger is, probably not. Let's get a light on there. I don't know if it'll show up in the camera, but if this thing here is spinning, then that of course is for the front drive shaft. So let's go ahead and spin this rear drive shaft now, and make sure my wheels are turning, and I can see the front is spinning, and I've rotated it considerably here past where I would expect it to bind, and I am not feeling any binding at all. So that is a really, really good sign. So let me go ahead and rotate it the other direction just to be sure. And it feels good. That clanking is just because the front drive shaft is spinning and it's not connected. But yeah, I easily would have bound up by now in either direction. So that is a really, really good indication that our problem is not going to be with this transfer case. Now, just to verify that scientifically, let's go ahead and repeat this up at the front differential and check that we do get the binding there. Let's go ahead and turn this, and oh wow. Oh, I can definitely tell you that it is seriously messed up. It's very jumpy and jerky. Oh man, this is terrible. And right there, it just locked up on me. I can't, let me see if I can turn the wheel there. I can spin the wheel and free it up, but yeah, it's catching right there. This front differential is definitely toast, but that is really good news. Now, one of the things that could also be the drive shaft here is faulty, but it seems to be okay. I will probably, just for safe purposes, replace that drive shaft. But yeah, it doesn't look like too much to get this thing out of here. I won't show that. That's just a bunch of brainless monkey wrenching there. But what I do want to do is, when I get this thing out of here, I want to take a look inside of it and just see how bad that damage is, that it poked a hole through the case like that. So let me go get this differential out of here and then also see what I can arrange at a salvage yard, and we'll be back. All right, another definitive diagnosis, but we've got a lot of work to do still. However, I just wanted to take a moment to just show the importance of a diagnostic scientific mindset, how important it is to not just stop on what you find to be the problem. In a scientific mindset, you're always thinking in terms of what we call an etiology or an original source, and that is, was there something that caused this obvious problem that we found? And also you're looking downstream of that. You're looking, as a result of this problem, what other damage could have resulted that maybe we're not considering because we're so focused on just this one problem. You see, there's several instances where both this upstream and downstream effect can be considered in this exact example. We first noticed that the differential was bouncing around inside the mount with a bad bushing, but obviously, is that what the problem is? Replacing that bushing is not going to fix the problem because the entire differential is blown to pieces there. So obviously that leads down to, is the differential just blown to pieces the problem? Well, obviously that seems to be the case here. I'm not totally exactly sure why, but we'll do maybe a little more investigation. But the thing is, we can easily see that if we just rested at that and said, oh, look, the differential is bad, and we replace that differential, we could easily have blown out the new differential immediately upon driving the vehicle, because there could have been a problem with the transfer case that caused the differential to fail. So that's why we always want to do the diagnosis to see if we can find anything that causes the problem. That's all upstream thinking. We're also always thinking downstream. As a result of a truck like this having a locked differential and trying to drive past that, what other mounts or bushings could have been damaged from this? Could there be broken transmission mounts? Could there be bad CV joints? There's all kinds of things that we might think could also be affected as a result of this. So we're always thinking in terms of that. And that is what makes us different than most of your hacks that would look at that and go, oh, it needs a differential. So there's one other order of business to take care of. And that is, some of you lizards might be thinking that I'm not doing this entirely altruistically because Dory sounds like she might be a single woman that in this time of need, without ability to pay, I might be taking advantage of this situation, considering of some alternative forms of payment. Well, you scumbags who are thinking that, I can absolutely 100% assure you that that is not the case, and there is no possibility that that is even a consideration. I won't go into the details why, because I don't want to talk too much about my customers, but let's just say it's not even an issue. But I just noticed something in this truck here. Well, you may not notice, but the carpeting in this truck is in pretty bad shape. It almost looks like somebody's been munching on this carpet. I also noticed this totally chewed out box here. I almost cut myself on the front console with these scissors. So maybe this box wasn't eaten, but there's no question that there's some scissoring going on in there. So you're free to draw your own conclusions, of course, but I can safely assure you I'm doing this for Dory because she really needs the help, and like I said, she really deserves it. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get that differential out of this truck, and then we'll take a closer look at it just for fun. Then I'll have to head off to the salvage yard, get another differential, and when I get it installed, we'll go ahead, test drive the car, and verify that we've got a repair. All right, it turns out this is actually not nearly so bad a job as I thought. I don't think I've actually ever removed one of these before, but it's actually fairly a piece of cake. But the main thing is, of course, we want to make sure that we check our axles here. So I removed the whole long axle. You can actually separate this piece, but I wanted to make sure there's no broken axle here, and the CV joint feels really good and stiff. It's also really good and stiff over here too. That actually may have been possibly replaced at some point, certainly within the vehicle's lifetime, I'm sure. But this is where our problem is here with this guy. So let's go ahead and move this guy onto the workbench and see if we can get a closer look. So we can see our hole punched through there. And let's go ahead and turn this thing now it's out of the car, and it's jammed right there. I cannot, there it goes. It feels absolutely atrocious, and you can listen maybe. Well, now it's totally jammed up. Well, never mind, it's totally jammed up. I can't, now there it goes a little bit in reverse. And it just feels absolutely terrible. Obviously, something is catching right there, and I can't turn it anymore. But let's go ahead and get this cover off and see how bad this damage is. All right, normally I'd be a lot more concerned about the surfaces here, but I'm really not very worried about destroying this thing. Okay. And I actually did rebuild the rear end on my Trans Am one time, quite a while ago. So this isn't too unfamiliar to me, but I'll tell you what is unfamiliar is this. And that would be these huge metal chunks all in the bottom of this thing. So that is a definite 100% confirmation that this thing is toasted. It looks like the ring gear. Probably those are pieces off of. And let's see, the whole thing is called the carrier. So I guess we might as well, let's go ahead and get that carrier out of there. One of the videos I've been wanting to do is actually a rear end rebuild because that is not just stupid monkey wrenching. A rear end rebuild is actually far less intuitive than you would think. It would look like you would just unbolt this carrier, put a new one in. It's hardly like that. You've got to set the depth on your ring gear with the pinion exactly right. And as a matter of fact, your carrier won't even fit back in. There's actually spacers to adjust the ring gear laterally as well. And we're talking like engine rebuilding, thousandths of an inch that you have to use these spacers to correctly space your carrier. And it's kind of a whole different thing doing a rear end rebuild or any differential rebuild. So that's for another time, but let's go ahead and see if we can get this thing out of here. All right, I will tell you, it smells like burnt toast. It absolutely smells exactly like burnt toast. It's kind of wicked. And I am not even sure if I'm going to be able to get this thing out of here because it's probably pretty jammed up. Let me get a pry bar. There we go. All right, yeah, this is definitely bringing back some memories of the Trans Am rebuild. So let's get this out. And in the back there, you can see, God, look at all that metal in there. On the back, you can see the pinion gear, and you can see a big, giant chunk of the pinion gear taken out. Let's see if you can see that. So you can see on the pinion gear here, if I turn it back, that we've got a massive chunk taken out of it. The bearing is completely destroyed. This is actually pretty awesome, I must say. All right, and then turning our attention to the ring gear, we can also see here we go, there's a whole gear tooth missing right there. That is actually really kind of amazing. Then we can look at the spider gear here, which this is actually where it's really catching, it seems. It catches, and I can't go past that unless I really flip it hard. So obviously we've got broken tooth or something there. But anyway, one thing, when you get that rear end noise on a rear-wheel drive car or all-wheel drive car, four-wheel drive, it's usually these carrier bearings here that fail. And there's also bearings in the axle tube as well. But you want to replace the axle tube bearings, but taking these bearings off, it looks very simple. You would just use a press to pull the bearings off, put the new ones on, and slap it back in. And what I'm saying is that nothing could be further from the truth. When you replace these bearings, you will probably find that if the thing even fits back in here, because there's going to be little spacers usually in here that you'll have to remove and put new spacers in, but there's a whole system. And it's a little tricky actually putting this back in, but there's a whole system because as you can see, let me just remove these, we don't need them, but as you can see when you install this, there can be a little bit of play side to side with this, and that play has to be exactly adjusted, because if it's not, then the pinion does not set properly in your ring gear, and if it's at too much depth or not enough depth, if the pinion is just barely engaged with these teeth, your rear end rebuild will not last very long at all. And for all I know, maybe that's what happened with this car. I don't know the whole history on it. But a rear end rebuild is definitely not a first-timer, beginner type of thing. So what I'm going to do, rather than do a rebuild on this, which the whole point of this is, I'm sure some of you are wondering why not just rebuild it. That's actually a considerable job, and the next time I do a rebuild, I certainly will film it, because again, there is a lot to know about how to do that properly and set your pinion depth and all that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and see if we can get to the pick and pull and find one of these guys. So I believe these are exactly the same as what's used in the Ford Explorer. I hope so, because especially here in Colorado, Ford Explorers are a dime a dozen, so I should have no problem finding one of these in a salvage yard. Oh, and I forgot, here's that bad bushing right here that initially I had a glimmer of hope that maybe this was all that was wrong, but very obviously what happened, the binding in here caused this bushing to become destroyed. So that is not nearly so lucky that all we had was just a bad bushing. But anyway, I actually have a little problem. It's going to be too late to get to the pick and pull today, so I'm going to try to go first thing tomorrow, see what we can find. Maybe I'll bring you guys along with me. They don't really allow filming, I don't think, in the pick and pull, but we'll see what I can get away with. All right, I am all packed up for my trip tomorrow morning to the salvage yard. So obviously I want to go over the vehicle and make sure there's nothing else the vehicle needs while I'm there. But the most important thing, by far, I want to make absolutely certain that I get the correct differential, just in case there's different gear ratios that were made available. I'm not totally sure. I'm not really much of a Ford guy, but it's entirely possible that there could be different gear ratios with different differentials, maybe with different model years. So I want to make sure I get information that will ensure that I get a gear ratio for the front differential that exactly matches the rear differential. So that's what I want to do now. Normally the differentials will have a tag on them. As you noticed, this one didn't have any kind of tag or anything. I don't know the history of the vehicle. Maybe the gear ratio on the differential that we pulled out of this vehicle wasn't matching, but we're going to make sure we don't make that mistake and have a failed transfer case or something very quickly as a result. So let's do this. So the rear differential does have the tag that you can decode these numbers and get the gear ratio. Of course, I'll want to match up with an identical tag for a front differential if I can at the salvage yard, so I'm going to take note of this. And the other thing I want to do is get the codes off the door jamb, and let's see, oh, actually it's right here, and let's see, oh man, it's all chewed up and everything. That is a bummer. Oh man, so what I'm looking for is a code for axle. And it doesn't give the axle ratio directly. It's going to be a code that you can convert and find what the axle ratio would be. There it is, right there. Axle 4.5, it looks like. And I'm not a Ford guy. I know what the axle codes might be on a GM much better, but I have no idea what a 4.5 is. And it doesn't matter. I could go look and convert it and see if it's like a 323 or 355 or whatever. But the thing is, I want to match this up on the donor vehicle to greatly increase the chance that I pull a differential that has the same gear ratio. Obviously, it's not guaranteed at a salvage yard. That salvage yard vehicle may have at some point had a differential replacement too with the wrong one, but also hopefully maybe it has a tag on it that I can match. I'm going to go ahead and take a picture of that, and of course I've got one of the tag on the rear differential, so now I should be able to increase my chance of matching the front differential with the rear.